our children. Justin Wilson is the managing director for the Center for Union Facts, and my guest now. Justin, so let me just clarify what we're saying. The Philadelphia City Council wants Howard Zinn's A People's History of the United States to be taught in schools. We don't know whether it will, but a couple of these other issues have already been approved for teaching in our schools, including apparently some lesson that appears to praise the unions by talking about how they make people's lives better and a union can help people. And there have been objections to this. Why?
Well, you know, 95% of teachers have one thing in mind, and that's just teaching students. But there's 5% of them that I think fall in line with the teachers' unions in being far more ideological. The trouble is that it's that 5% that really find their way into places of power. And on whether it's on a curriculum committee or it's on a state board of education or whatever it may be, when they start setting agendas for what we're teaching our children, it starts trickling down all the way to the bottom of the curriculum scale. In this case, there was a booklet intended for 4th grade students, and it told the story of a girl who was overhearing her parents talk about how the union was good and they were going to go on a strike, and how she was kind of fearful about the next day. The trouble is that it was a reading comprehension book. I mean, it was just an attempt to teach children how to understand certain words and, you know, why their parents were talking in hushed tones. We don't need to have a politically charged curriculum in order to teach people to read, especially 4th graders.
Well, that's what the school came out and said. Look, we're just testing reading comprehension, and that's all. We want to make sure that they have the ability to understand ideas and concepts through context. And so they think that there's nothing wrong with this sort of, you know, what they're reading doesn't matter, just that they're reading and comprehending it.
Right, but you know what? You could be reading a textbook on American history, or you could be reading the People's History of the United States. One of them is going to hopefully give you a relatively dispassionate but good understanding of both the positives and negatives of American history, while the other one is going to be a politically charged, one-sided account of what happened from one sort of radical academic's point of view. Both of them are going to teach children how to read. I think we should be choosing the first one. The trouble is that we have, to a certain extent, some people with labor unions, whether it's the American Federation of Teachers or others, who are advocating, you know, a political ideology. So, for instance, you know, in this case, we've seen the teachers' unions even advocate on behalf of allowing teachers to endorse political candidates in the classroom. In fact, they filed a lawsuit saying that was a teacher's First Amendment right. We don't need politics in the classroom, especially when it comes to things that have nothing to do with the kind of politics that they're talking about.
One book recommended, as I was attempting to say in the intro, for 3rd graders is Si Se Puede, Yes We Can, which is the story of the 1985 janitor strike in Los Angeles. And it tries to help students answer the question, how can we work together as a community to stand up for our rights? I mean, to some on the right, those are code words for how can we unionize, how can we organize, how can we challenge employers, and so on. And these touch on issues that get debated every day in our politics and our lives.
You know, there's an appropriate way to approach politics in schools, and maybe it's not even appropriate for a 3rd grade audience. The trouble here is that teachers' unions are one of the last vestiges of an employment system from the 1950s that does not value market-based or merit-based principles, that instead sees teachers as a cog in a wheel. You know, the American Federation of Teachers still uses the word solidarity in a way that we might have heard from the International Solidariat in the early 1900s. They come from an ideological background that really is completely out of sync with our times. And so when we occasionally hear of these things cropping up, and frankly, they're not that hard to find, so it always makes me wonder how many more of them are there out there. That, you know, you have to wonder. The real scary thing here, though, is that these teachers' unions have created a system so that if there is those 5% of teachers who are ideologues who want to do it, they don't have any fear that they're going to have any reprisal for being more, you know, indoctrinating students and using materials like this in their classroom.
Well, we'll continue to follow it. Justin, thank you.
Hey, my pleasure.
Up next, a new twist in the controversy that led to this dramatic confrontation at Brown University. Ann Hannity at the top of the hour.